Hey guys, Scripted, we're here with another video. So, Star Wars' new movies have 3 Luke Skywalker replacements, and it's for the best. I don't think that's a necessary thing. I mean, what replacing Luke? Like, I don't understand. I mean, with The Last Jedi, they didn't want Luke. They wanted some other version of Luke. They wanted Jake. For decades, even after the original trilogy ended, Luke Skywalker has been at the heart of Star Wars. He's the saga's biggest hero and every man with whom every fan could relate and root for. And while the Skywalker saga expanded to become more than his story, along with his father Anakin, is someone the franchise has always returned to, whether it was the old expanded universe, aka Legends, the sequel trilogy, or the Disney Plus shows. Luke has always been brought back no matter how many times his story has ostensibly ended. Well, there was a lot to tell after Jedi. He was a pretty young man. He was in his 20s. So there's lots you could do. The problem is they had a 30-year gap and then made him a bum. So everything leads to bum, so people don't want to... So even if you put him in stuff, like Ahsoka, Book of whatever, you know where it leads. So you're like, well, I don't know. It just doesn't hit the same. I know when he was in The Mandalorian and Grogu, people got excited, but it just didn't hit the same. For me at least, because I knew where it all was leading, and it all seemed to be rather silly. You could create a problem for Luke to solve that involved a change in his character, but it had to make sense. And what they did just didn't make any sense, and it wasn't about Luke overcoming anything either. Because ultimately he was convinced by Rey to get back into the fold. So really he was just used as a device to add to Rey's mythology as this just incredible at everything character and never has any problems. And then on top of it is the person who makes Luke care again because Luke didn't care. And we know that because he says the Jedi need to end. And then he says, I will not be the last Jedi to Kylo. And I'm going to, there's somebody else and it's not over and I care now. That being said, I think that right there just completely takes away and he's not the hero that everybody thought he was. After he turned up to rescue Grogu in The Mandalorian, it seemed like there might be greater plans for the Jedi, but that hasn't proved to be the case. The child left Luke to go back to Jin in the Book of Boba Fett, and Skywalker himself appeared as a kid in Obi-Wan, but there's been little else. The franchise may finally be growing beyond him as it gears up for its return to theaters for the first time since 2019, with multiple characters ready to fill the void of Luke Skywalker in the saga. So on the one hand, you're saying that he hasn't been used very much. There's little else than these 2 shows or whatever, but at the same time saying it's time to move on. The franchise may be growing beyond him. The franchise already was growing beyond him. And as we've discussed with The Last Jedi. And he's in The Mandalorian and Grogu because I personally believe because Jon Favreau fought for that. And that's basically it. I mean, in the Book of Boba Fett, he's a different character. He makes Grogu choose. It felt flimsy when he's added into these shows. And they already moved on from him. Right? From the very beginning, they wanted to move on from him, and I feel like they felt pressured to put him in a few things just to kind of placate fans. But it wasn't something that they necessarily wanted to do. Because, again, they wanted Luke to be the bum on the island to make sure we all focused on Rey. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, he's really not in it. It's all about Leia and all about Reva. So it's not that they're finally growing beyond him. They grew beyond him. He's only allowed to be included if he's this lesser version of Luke that doesn't even make sense throughout. So the only thing that was given was the last episode of Mandalorian Season 2, where he showed up, did some cool stuff, didn't really say much, took Grogu, and then they decided to just have him make Grogu choose, and Grogu chose to go back with Din, so he doesn't really do much anyway. So they've pretty much already moved beyond him anyway, which isn't a good thing. It was a mistake. It was a mistake from the beginning with The Last Jedi. A simple task to have him go out a champion and go out the hero that everybody wanted, but they decided to make him completely beholden to somebody else coming and convincing him that the Jedi were still worthwhile. Doesn't really hold up. That, oh, we moved on from him. How other characters are taking on Luke Skywalker's role. The most direct replacement for Luke is the one he himself helped train, Rey. He didn't do anything. What did he help train her in? Somebody tell me in the comments section. What did he do? He told her to reach out in the Force, which she's already done anyway in the previous movie, but he tells her to reach out, and then she's so powerful, she cracks the rock, and then he runs away. Okay, there's lesson 1. What was lesson 2? I don't even remember. She fiddles around with a lightsaber for a bit. Yeah, let me know in the comments. I don't know what he taught her. I don't think he taught her anything. It was the other way around. She was teaching him. And then she stole the Jedi texts without telling him, and then just moved on from him and had them. And that was it. She's the new Jedi hero who can not only lead the next generation of characters, but also help delight and inspire a new generation of fans as well. Building on the sequel trilogy, which may have been divisive but was an entry point into the franchise for many, and that value cannot be discounted when it comes to Rey's future, she has the Skywalker name, and assuming her movie does eventually happen, will be fulfilling Luke's ambition of building a new Jedi Order. Okay, well, if she was really a character that you could move on from and would be an acceptable, quote, replacement, why haven't they moved on then? They announced her movie, what, like 3 years ago? Nothing's happening? So no, it's like they've completely pigeonholed themselves. Those 3 movies really, really screwed them. And it was amazing they didn't have the foresight to know that, because now it's like, what are you going to do? She can't be the new face of the franchise. Din Djarin, not really either anymore. It's kind of like, meh. So now you're moving on to somebody, I don't know, Ryan Gosling. While the character reportedly won't be force sensitive, has a bit of Han Solo rogue coolness about him. There's also enough to suggest he could be taking on Luke-esque role for the franchise. What? That is an everyman hero who goes on a daring adventure, a hotshot pilot, and crucially someone who could become one of the franchise's faces post-sequels, with this taking place 5 years after Rise of Skywalker. Again, good luck with that. Good luck with that. You had a golden goose in Luke Skywalker, and you screwed it up. I still can't believe it. I don't understand. I don't mind him dying. That's fine if you have to move on from him, but move on from him in the right way. And then you could use him in all those shows and all those things leading up to the sequels, and people would clamor for it. But you didn't. You literally, on the basis of subverting expectations, you literally abandoned your golden goose. Like, to me, this is why you buy Star Wars for $4 billion, is characters like Luke Skywalker. Because you can just continuously make money off of him for decades. There's a 30-year gap of storytelling you could do. But again, everything leads to him being a bum on an island, and so even if he's doing cool things, in the back of your mind, you're like, oh yeah, but then he does that, and completely bucks his basic character, and takes on flaws that he never had before. So I can't believe they did that. I still can't believe it. So the idea that these characters are going to replace him, the Mandalorian or Ryan Gosling's character, we don't even know his character's name, and we're talking about this, or Rey, it's not a possibility. They really, really, really screwed up bad. Star Wars needs to move beyond Luke Skywalker. Why? The Golden Goose? Star Wars having multiple characters who can step up and lead the franchise like Luke Skywalker before them is a good thing, because the saga cannot keep relying on past to shape its future. But they are, though. They're doing shows in between Jedi and the sequels. Multiple shows. I'm surprised this article didn't bring up Ahsoka as his replacement, because she's essentially replacing him in the Thrawn arc. So this whole thing is contradictory, because again, they're doing everything in that timeline, but then not including him in it. And when they have included him in it, it's been very brief and disappointing. Brief in The Mandalorian, very disappointing in the Book of Boba Fett. You know, I think the smart money would have been Grogu stays with Luke, and the next time you see Grogu, he's older and he's talking, and he's like a more of a seasoned, mind you, he's still bloody powerful as a baby. It doesn't even really matter, but that would have been at least something. You would have been able to move on from Grogu, which now has become redundant and kind of meh, as a baby, and had him as a grown Grogu with Luke, And there's a million different story arcs you could do there. And even though they lead up to the sequels, you maybe still could have done something. But you did focus in that timeline constantly, and you did do what you did with him regardless. So if they were moving on, they would move on. Luke has been one of my favorite fictional characters ever since I was a little kid, obsessively wearing out the original trilogy on VHS, and I'd gladly watch more stories with him if there are great stories worth telling, but it also needs to invest in its new characters who can help define the next... But that's what they've been doing, though. That's what they've been doing. And technically, the only real new character in the last number of years was Mando. Because all the other, quote, new characters that they're focusing on are Dave Filoni's Rebels characters. So Favreau's really the only guy that's come up with a main character that's really very new, that wasn't attached to Rebels or to anything else. Now, I'm still not happy that they took Boba Fett's story and gave it to a new character, but that is the only real new character. So they have been investing in the new characters or the new character, and then of course you've got Cara Dune in there and some of these other smaller characters. But that's what they're doing. I mean, they're doing a Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Like, they're doing all these Rebels characters in the Ahsoka show. And then the Filoni movie's supposed to bring them all together. But this idea that you could replace Luke, that's a very, very mistake-riddled argument. I think it's where they were coming from originally with Rey, that she was going to replace Luke, and in an effort to accomplish that, we have to make Luke a total loser bum. And what a massive mistake. Like I said, this was the golden goose. Send him off awesomely in the sequels. Make him a hero. Do it right. Don't make him a loser bum. Don't make him regress as a character. He not only regresses, he regresses back to like somewhere he never was. Because in the originals, he was anxious to learn about his dad and the Jedi, and anxious to be someone reliable that can be used to help the cause. So he was like a completely different character in the sequels. So they've moved on, but they just try to like, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. Oh, we need a couple extra bucks. Oh, we need to titillate a little bit. Do that. The thing is they should have made him awesome, and they should have set themselves up to do years and years and years of stories involving Luke, and then you bring in other characters with him. But you can't replace him. That's never going to happen. No one's ever going to look at Rey the same way. No one's ever going to look at Din Djarin the same way. No one's ever going to look at whoever Ryan Gosling's character is the same way. And not understanding that and going for the move on from Luke thing because Rey's going to replace him or anybody else is going to replace him is a really dumb strategy. And it's already been proven to be dumb. So the idea that they're going to do 10 to 20 more years with these new characters, I have serious doubts that it would even last anywhere near that long, let alone those characters being even remotely viewed in the same way that Luke is viewed. Maybe they think because of what they did with him in the Last Jedi, people will flock towards another character, maybe that isn't Rey, that isn't such a Mary Sue, because Luke does turn out to be a bum, so that they can't really use him anymore to the same effect. But it still all goes back to a really stupid strategy. Luke's arc, for the most part, is done. We've seen his greatest feats and his lowest moments, his triumphs and his tragedies. And while there's probably still room for things with his fledgling Jedi Order or involving him in the fight against Grand Admiral Thrawn, there's more untapped potential with other characters. Well, of course, because they wrote it that way. Luke's new Jedi Order really doesn't matter because it gets burned down. It ended up being a failure because he decided to think about killing his nephew, because that makes perfect sense for Luke to do that. So there's no way this is ever going to work at this point. It's over. By keeping him out of the picture and thrusting others into the theatrical spotlight, it can fully establish them as the leads for a new generation, which will be vital if the saga is to keep on surviving. Again, I disagree. I don't think you had to move on. I think new generations would be just fine and dandy with seeing Luke Skywalker content that led to something good and was good content in and of itself. This isn't something that they need to do. It's something they've already done, and there's nothing they can do about it. And again, you could have had him still very involved if it had been done right, and the new generation would have been perfectly happy with that. And in fact, that would tie into the old stuff, which still makes you money, And a new generation could get into the old stuff too. The original trilogy and stuff like that. As it stands, there are no plans to see Skywalker on screen again, and it seems unlikely Mark Hamill will return. Yeah, we already know. He said he's not into it. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't see him again, though. Star Wars has previously brought him back with a combination of Hamill stand-ins and CGI, but it could go more fully into the recast route if they wanted him to be involved in a bigger capacity, such as if they really did want him involved in the battle against Thrawn, which seems set to culminate in a movie of its own. That would be controversial in its own right, given the stature of the character, but could be the best path forward, giving him a proper future. Otherwise, though, it seems like Luke will finally be allowed to rest for now. Well, and again, it's just because of bad decisions and making decisions that were based on business and not smartness. Thinking again that him being a bum would make us move on with Rey, giving Grogu back to the Mandalorian, and then the way they did that instead of letting Grogu go. It was a business decision. Oh, we have to keep him. Because it was pretty obvious at the end of Season 2 of Mandalorian that Grogu was moving on to be with Luke. But then they just couldn't help themselves because we got to sell plushies. And that's what George Lucas said. He said he talked about the corporate stuff wrecks art. A few years after he sold. So let me know in the comment section. Are any of you guys excited to move on from Luke to the extent that you think he can be replaced by any of these characters? Does he need to be replaced? I don't think so. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like, subscribe. It always helps the channel. Feel free to check everything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.